Ella decided to visit her grandmother in the village. She hadn't been there for a long time, and when she arrived, her grandmother was glad to see her. Grandma told her that a neighbor had been in the forest, saw many berries and mushrooms there, and that it was very beautiful. Grandma was old and could no longer go to the forest, but Ella knew that forest. She used to go there with her whole family when she was a child. Memories of those happy days made her nostalgic, and Ella decided that she would go to the forest the next morning. When she woke up the next day, Ella saw sunny weather and felt that she was in a good mood. The way to the forest was short, and when she reached the edge, the smell of the forest beckoned her, promising new adventures. She entered the forest, enjoying nature and her memories. It was nice in the forest, and in a good mood. Ella began to walk around. She did not notice how quickly time passed and how far she had gone. Gradually, Ella realized that she did not know where she was, and that she was lost. Panic began to set in. She stopped, trying to get her bearings, but everything around looked the same. She decided that she had to try to find her way out. It was already beginning to get dark, fear was growing, and there was no way out in sight. It became completely dark, and suddenly Ella felt that someone was watching her. No one was visible, but this feeling did not leave her. She quickened her pace, but did not notice how she ended up in a swamp. It felt as if someone had deliberately led her in the wrong direction. Falling into the swamp, Ella felt the icy water envelop her legs. She tried to get out, but it was very difficult. Several hours passed, her strength began to leave her, but she finally managed to get out onto dry land. Sitting on the ground, she felt her strength leaving her completely. Silence reigned around, only the wind rustled in the trees. Ella froze, unable to move. Thoughts that she would never get out of this forest she had known since childhood began to fill her head. She decided to walk in the opposite direction from the swamp, cold, tired, and in the darkness. The feeling that someone was watching her did not leave her. Losing track of time, she did not know how many hours had passed. Suddenly something stirred, and Ella saw the light of a lantern. She rejoiced, thinking she was saved. She decided to run towards the light, shouting for help. When she reached the light, she was met by her grandmother. Ella was delighted. Her grandmother hugged her, and with tears they headed home. As they walked towards the house, Ella began to think that something was wrong. When she left for the forest, her grandmother couldn't get up from her chair without help. And now she had walked such a long distance and wasn't even limping. Her thoughts grew stronger and stronger, and suddenly she realized that she hadn't gotten out of the swamp. The forest had taken her. Ella sat on the doorstep of the house and felt a cold sweat run down her back. Something about her grandmother's behavior was unnatural. Grandma hadn't said a word since they entered the house, just watching her with empty eyes. Ella stood up and tried to find a logical explanation for everything that was happening, but her thoughts were interrupted by visions from the past. "Grandma, you couldn't walk when I left," Ella finally said, hoping for some explanation. Grandma slowly turned her head and looked at her with a gaze full of emptiness and darkness. She was silent, but her eyes spoke more than words. Ella felt panic rising within her. "Who are you?" Ella whispered, backing towards the door. But Grandma didn't answer. Instead, she began to change before her eyes. Her face started to blur, turning into something horrible and unnatural. Ella screamed, but the sound of her scream was swallowed by silence. She rushed to the door, but it was locked. Trying not to fall into hysteria, Ella remembered that there should be a spare exit door somewhere in the house. She rushed to find it, but the house, once so familiar, now seemed like a maze, room after room, but no exit. Suddenly, a silhouette appeared in front of her, but it wasn't her grandmother. It was her father, who had died many years ago. Ella felt her heart beat even faster. "Dad," she whispered, not believing her eyes. The silhouette didn't answer but reached out to her. Ella froze in place, not knowing what to do. Fear and the desire to understand the truth fought within her mind. But when she took a step forward, everything around her started to darken. She felt cold hands wrap around her neck, and suddenly everything disappeared. Ella woke up again in the forest. Darkness surrounded her, but now she knew what this place was. It wasn't just a forest, it was something sinister, playing with her mind, luring her into a trap. She realized that she had to fight to get out. There was only darkness around, but she saw a small beam of light in the distance. Gathering her last strength, Ella began to move towards the light. Each step was difficult, but she didn't give up. Finally, she reached the edge of the forest and saw that the light came from an old lantern standing on her grandmother's porch. But the house was abandoned, as if no one had visited it for many years. Ella approached and saw an old photo album on the porch. She opened it and saw photos of her family taken in this forest. On the last page was a photo she had never seen before. In it, she stood on the edge of the forest with a frightened expression on her face. Ella realized that she had not gotten out of the forest. The forest was playing with her mind, making her see things that weren't there. She fell to her knees and cried, realizing that she would never escape this cursed place. The forest had taken her forever.